Hey guys, we are live. Nick, we are live. Are you
We're
excited?
live. I am
Baby, we're
excited.
in here.
And if I wasn't excited, you make it more exciting, right? Like that's your personality. So you just raise the water level there. I'm good to go.
Nick, I am excited because I'm just through the moon. I have finished this amazing book. I'm gonna go out of focus now, but that's okay because this book kind of like needs to be in focus. This amazing book, the Volunteer Playbook that you just came out with, and I am just through the moon and just super excited that you have produced this amazing resource for the Kidmin community. Not just children's ministry. I think if you read this, if you are in ministry, period, you are going to get help when it comes to recruiting, retaining, equipping, empowering volunteers. So I am just super grateful. Hey, you guys, as you guys are coming in, I'm going to try to not be so excited because then I get fuzzy in this camera.
You can be excited just at the same depth. You're like you can't, you can't
I've always
change.
wondered how I could be excited and just stand
Yeah,
like this.
talk with your hands. You can't talk with your hands.
You guys are in for a treat today. Hey, as you are coming in, we are talking about volunteers today, recruiting them, retaining them. Come on, y'all. Listen, if you have any type of issue when it comes to volunteers, we need for you to tune in tonight. We need for you to text a buddy, text a friend that you know is a girlfriend. Do people say boyfriend? No, I don't do that. Don't do that.
Probably not. But it can work the other way.
Probably not. But get your friends on here. They need to be in here tonight because we are going to have an amazing time. Today, we are with Nick Blevins. Nick, tell us a little bit about who you are as people are coming in. Hey, as you guys are coming in, we want to know where you are from. Let us know where you are tuning in the chat box. We are super excited. We know Nick, we get people all over the world. I'm like, we'll be sitting here. They be like Florida. You be like, yeah, Ohio, okay. They be like Bangladesh. You be like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's the beauty of the internet.
so exciting. We
That's
get
cool.
to be what we get to be a part of. It's just absolutely incredible, and none of us are like self-proclaimed experts. We are here so that we can grow and become better together. So y'all know how we do. If y'all got advice, and it's God has put something on your heart and in your spirit, I want you to share that in the chat box. Somebody might be here tonight. Somebody might watch it later. And it's what you said that really set the atmosphere and changed the trajectory of where they were going in ministry. So go ahead and do that. Nick, tell us who you are.
All right. My wife and I got 3 kids, aged 10, 7, and 4. I am a children's pastor who became a next gen pastor. So children's ministry is still my heart. You're right. I did write the book for basically any church leader that leads volunteers.
Yeah.
But if you read it, you'll see that like most of the stories and analogies apply to children's ministry because that's the world, that I am most well versed in. We helped start a church here north of Baltimore, Maryland 17 years ago. So it was a church plant and not like a normal church plant though. So it's kind of unique in some ways, but it's been a fun 17-year ride. I can remember the night before we launched the church still making the children's ministry security tags.
Yeah.
Like these were like this. We didn't have a printer back then with a nice app that you checked into. Like this was all paper check-in. These, printed name tags of kids and they'd slide them in this thing or whatever. We had to make that the night before. And I can remember that like it's clear as day. And at the same time, 17 years ago, I mean, it feels like I'm, 40 years older or something because church planting definitely can age you fast. So that's my story. Next gen pastor now for the last probably 12 years and get to help other church leaders through different ways. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yay. Ministry boost. I mean, it helps leaders all across the country.
That's our goal.
Yeah, you guys, we are going to make sure that you have all that information and access by the end of the evening so that you can go and get the help that you need. Absolutely awesome, incredible, amazing organization. We are going to jump into our conversation tonight. As Nick has said, we are both parents, actually. And so funny because my son was like tapping on the door and I'm like this, oh, you text your husband like I'm going to do right now and say help. and
Help.
with the
Yeah.
exclamation point so that we can continue our live conversation tonight. But
I can read what's going on there. You know what I mean? Like our youngest literally poked her head in the door before we started recording. And I think they're well versed enough now that she looked at me and just waited. It was like, okay, this doesn't seem like a good time. She's only 4, but she knows enough.
She may kill me after this is over.
Because there's times when like you come in, you're on a Zoom call, like it'd be cute, you can talk to whoever, right? But like I feel like my kids have started to learn, like, let me just see. If he looks at me, I'm probably good. If he looks away from me, it's probably not good.
Exactly.
Not the right time.
Correct. Hey, you guys, we are going to jump into this conversation tonight, all about volunteers. Nick, I'm so excited about the wisdom that you are going to pour out on us this evening. So I want to jump into this question about time, right? Because I feel like my question is, what role does time play in recruiting volunteers? And I say this because, come on, we know it. We get super busy in children's ministry. I mean, whatever your situation is, maybe you're bivocational and you're watching tonight. Maybe you're in a situation where children's ministry isn't the only thing that you're held accountable for, that you're responsible for, because you are a part of staff. And as a staff, and you have to be a part of this, and you feel like you're doing so much. And Nick, we become hamsters on a wheel. So I'm asking you, how does time play? What role does time play in ministry? And really for those who may be watching tonight who feel like, Nick, I'm like stretched to the max. Like I don't have time to connect. I don't have time to build relationships. Give us some advice on that. What do you say about that when it comes to the time that we spend?
And I can maybe give some ideas to help make some time, because the big issue is that I'd say time is probably the number one problem when it comes to volunteer recruiting. You know, like if I were teaching this to a room full of folks, like at a conference breakout, or we just did this with a large church in Colorado last week with all their kids and student staff. And the church is so large that there's 30 people on staff just in that area because they have multiple campuses and all this thing. Yeah. And I asked them the same question. I said, hey, close your eyes. Don't look around. Don't cheat. Like your boss is not in the room. He had left. So it's like, nobody's watching. You know, hold up on one hand how many hours a week you spend recruiting, you know, like 0, 1, 2, 3, you know. And by far, the most common answer is 0 hours, by far. Yeah. Some people will say 1, like maybe 10%, and another 10% will say maybe 2. And sometimes you'll get people say 4, 3 or 4 hours. It's very rare. You know, 80% plus say 0. Yeah. And so it's not a surprise, right? That if we're spending 0 hours on it, we're getting 0 results from it. So that's why I say it's probably the most important factor is the time that we put into it. And for the people that are overwhelmed, hang in, because this first thing I'm going to say is hard. I think if you have not built like a good plan for recruiting, and you need to work on some other things that relate to recruiting, you may need to spend, the way I say it, and even in the book, is you might need to spend 6 to 8 hours a week for 4 weeks, like the first month, and then dial it down to like 4 hours a week the second month. And then eventually month 3, you can get it on what I call like a maintenance mode where it's like 2 hours a week. Yeah. And it's not always 2 hours a week. You're going to have your huge Easter event and you don't do any recruiting. You're just working on that event. Yeah. But then you come back the next week, hopefully, and spend some time on it again. And so, and of course, that church, they have the benefit that there's multiple staff. They can actually work on things faster because they have multiple team members. They can, hey, that team's going to create job descriptions and this team's going to create your orientation and things like that. And for most of us, that's not the case. We got to work on all that stuff ourselves. And so I think just a couple of quick tips for making time. I think far too often we look at everything we have to do and assume we have to keep doing it. Yeah. And maybe that's true. I mean, a lot of us in kids ministry, it's dictated what you can and can't do. Like you can't not do that event. You can't not do that program. Yeah. But I think it's worth asking, what could I stop or pause for 3 months? Some of those are pauses. It's not like you're never going to do it again. Yeah. And I mean serious things. Like maybe you don't send a parent email for 3 months. Maybe like things that you think, maybe you don't do that Wednesday night thing for 3 months. Like we used to do it in the summer. We're not going to do it this summer. I don't know. Like things that, again, remember, we're not going to do that fall event we do every year and it's always good. But we're going to make recruiting such a priority. We're going to take off and all of those hours are going here. So, and then you could delegate some things. You talk about that in your newest book. So I think there's ways you got to try to steal time to make time, even 2 hours a week, though. If you could just give 2 hours a week, you can make some progress. It's obviously a lot more than most of us are giving when we're like, 0 hours. Sorry. You know.
Well, Nick, I love that because I mean, and I'll say from my own experience, part of it really started with my mind. Like my mentality was just like I had allowed so much of the busy work to kind of take over, and
Mhm.
I mean, I think a lot of us get to that point to where we don't believe that we have the time. You know, like I don't listen. Our entire ministry is based off of faith. Like we're just like, no, I don't believe I have time. Well, if you don't believe you don't have time, then you're not going to make time because you don't believe it is possible. So I love this whole idea of being really serious and really taking a look and potentially pulling back, on some things. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love in your book, you guys, the volunteer playbook. We will make sure that you have the link in here tonight because you have to, everybody should have this book a part of their, not just their collection, but a book that you pull out. I will say, Nick, as I was reading the book, I'm like, this is a book that you just continue to pull out. This is not, okay, I read this book and I'm done. And it was fun. Check. It is a book you constantly pull out. And hey, I need to deal with this. I'm struggling with vision and all of this. Let me go back to this so that I can remember how to do this the right way and to do it in a way that's effective. So let's go there. I want to ask you about vision and how important that is, because once again, and I would call myself a self-proclaimed, I feel like I went to like the AA version of getting off the hamster wheel or whatever that is.
Sure. Yeah, workaholic or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but you're on it, and we talk about vision all the time, right? Vision is something, I mean, you go over every book and we know that it's important, but why don't we really do it? Why don't we really create that compelling vision? Your vision is your why. It's what people need to hold on to. We struggle with passing on the baton of vision to the co-laborers who are around us and to our volunteers. I guess my question to you, Nick, are what are the dangers of being lax when it comes to vision or
Sure.
allowing that to kind of lead? What do you think about that?
Yeah, and maybe I start a little bit with clarifying vision because I feel like,
Mhm,
and I do that in the book, but I feel like that's one of the things that's confusing. Like even I talk about
mhm,
mission, vision, strategy, culture in the book, and almost all of those get confused,
mhm.
for different
Yep,
things or use one
yep,
word and it's kind of another. And I'm
yep.
certainly not the authority on it. And I think vision actually might be the most confusing. I just picture vision as like a
Mhm,
picture of a preferred future. I think Andy Stanley had a quote
mhm.
about that one time. Or another way he said it is a vision of like a picture of what could be fueled by the passion that it should
Yeah,
be, which I
yeah,
thought was great because it brings in that passion
yeah.
part.
That's good.
I think most people aren't wired to naturally be good at sharing vision. Like think about the
Yeah.
people we know who are just inspirational.
Mhm,
Like even preachers, there's certain
mhm.
ones, it's like, man, every time, I listen to them, that's one of their strengths. I think most of us, that's not our strength. And so
Yeah,
then if you're going to do a good job with vision, you have to work at it. You got to be intentional about it. I think the other thing that's hard is there's like big picture vision.
yeah.
Like we want to create a church that unchurched people love to attend. I've heard that a lot,
Mhm.
right? That'd be a big
Yeah,
picture. It's not
yeah,
even measurable. I mean, it's kind of measurable. Like, did we do it or not? I don't know. But
yeah.
it's big picture. There's a vision though for like what kids check-in should look like on Sunday.
Mm,
Like it's not big picture. It's right in
yeah,
the weeds. It's like that
yeah,
printer should actually work. That'd be great. If that actually
yeah.
worked this week, that'd be awesome. There should be enough that people don't have to wait forever, right? They should be greeted by somebody who's
Nick, I
smiling
know
and welcome.
somebody right now saying hallelujah.
I know. Like we can't get those dang printers to work. And so that's where vision is tough because you get this huge big
Yeah,
picture for your church all the way down to like your ministry to like your that specific
yeah,
role. Like, hey, if you're holding the door of greeting guests, here's a vision for what that looks like. So I think without it though, people do whatever. In fact, I've used this
yeah.
quote a lot recently. I was working with a church, great church. I'm helping them find a kids pastor through Slingshot. I do some
Mhm.
work with them. And the church is awesome. They got their kids ministries growing. They're reaching young families, but they've been without a kids pastor for a little while.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
even before that, there was a whole stretch where it just wasn't a well-filled role, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
And so it's been a long time, since they've had what I would call to be a professional children's
yeah,
pastor in that role. And I don't mean that like somebody who's degreed or whatever. I just mean somebody who's done it,
yeah.
and knows it. Anyway, I say, and maybe this would be offensive, I don't know, but I joke, I say they're doing it. The volunteers are doing an amazing job holding it together, but it's very disunified, not in an unhealthy, like we're against each other way, but in like that service looks different from that service. And the preschool is very different from here. And the way I say it is like in the Bible, when it says everyone did what was right in their own eyes, I feel like that's what's happening here. You know what I mean? And so when you don't have vision, and in their case, they don't have a visionary, you know, to champion that. So it's not their fault. They're working on it. I'm trying to find them someone. Everybody does what's right in their own eyes. And some of that is good. Some of it's not good. Some of it's good, but not a fit for your ministry. And then the other big thing is if you don't have vision, people just get discouraged. I mean, ministry is hard. I mean, we're preaching to the choir now. We all know this. And sometimes we probably don't realize how hard it is for volunteers, you know, because it's so much harder in some ways as staff. And so it's hard. And even the wins are missed in children's ministry. I'll never forget when one of our preschool volunteers, I mean, this was like 15 years ago, and we did a training and we cast vision and we talked about why what they do matters, even in preschool. This is not childcare. Here's why this matters. And I remember her come up to me later saying, you know, I always just thought I was doing this as a volunteer to give parents a chance to go to the service while their kids were safe here. Like that, to me, that was the vision, you know? And then you all talked about this and I realized it was so much more than that. And part of me thought, I can't believe you thought that was only what it was. But I thought, you know, why not? Because I never told you. You know what I mean? I just assumed you knew what I knew or believed what I believed. And so ever since then, I just always remember you got to keep telling those stories, casting vision, painting a picture of what could be and help them get that same passion to be fueled by the fact that it should be.
I love it how you said that, like we assume. I mean, we do. We can, as you're going through the motions of ministry, how easy is it for you as you were watching tonight? I mean, let's be honest. You know, we just assume that people understand or that they know or that they get the vision or that they read it in the packet that you gave them when they volunteered in the beginning. Like, why don't you know the vision?
You read the whole thing, obviously.
It kind of ended up on the bottom of my kid's foot in the back seat.
You gave me a packet? What are you talking about?
Exactly. Nick, VCR. Listen, you talk about the importance of VCRs in your book. No, you guys.
I do.
Not the old school VCR.
And I am that old. So that maybe, you know, that could be confused. It's not that VCR, but it could be. You know, I'm old enough that I use one regularly.
You need to update your space, okay? If you were only operating with VCR. This is not what we are talking about. Nick, I want you to break this down. I loved it. This volunteer conversation ratio. And how we should speak, how we should be, you know, a recruit. Explain what you mean when you say VCR.
Sure. Well, we said earlier that time's probably the most important factor. The second one I say is that you need a strategy. Like you need a plan to recruit. And the VCR is like basically an equation for how many people you need to reach out to for every one volunteer you need to recruit. So the way I say it is, if you need to recruit 7 volunteers, like you've done the math, like you need to figure out, that's step one really, is figure out how many do you need to recruit. Like the answer can't just be more. Like how many do you need? I need more. Like it can't just be more. You need to know exactly how many. So go through, look at your rosters, look at your rooms and figure out, I've got this many, I've got 33, I want 40, I need 7 more. Well, the VCR, this is something we developed with Ministry Boost just over years of working with other churches, using it in our church. It's not perfect. It's not exact. You can come up with whatever yours is. But the idea is how many people are you going to have to reach out to get one volunteer? Is it 4? Is it 50? Is it 10? And we came up with 10. And to be honest, it used to be 4. Back when in one of our courses, in fact, if you were able to watch that course, I still teach that it's 4. But I realized people weren't putting enough prospects on their list. So they were only, they were using 4 and it wasn't working. So we increased that to 10. And 10 would be, you need to reach out to 10 people for every one volunteer you need to recruit. So VCR, volunteer conversion ratio, 10 people you're going to reach out to for every one volunteer. So in the example, if I need 7 volunteers, if I need to recruit 7 volunteers, I need to reach out to 70 people. And for most people, when I say that, they're shocked. Like, wow, that's a lot. I get a lot of people who tell me, hey, my church is 120 on average attendance. I need 17 volunteers. And you're telling me I need 170 prospects. That's what we call them, prospects, like people. And my answer is yes. Now, maybe no. It depends. Like, that's where it's not hard and fast. Like, you might do it and realize, oh, our VCR is 5. Like, we're getting one volunteer for every 5. But the reason it's that high is because, as I teach it in the book, you're going to contact these people and try to invite them to a conversation,
Yeah.
eventually get them to a volunteer orientation. But over half of them won't even reply, even if you reach out multiple times. So it's like 10 sounds like a lot. And especially when you say I need 70, like I need 7 volunteers, I need 70 prospects. Well, 40 of them won't even, at least 40 to 40. Maybe
I
50
love
of
how
them.
you're saying like half of them won't reply.
Oh, they don't. They
and
totally don't.
I think the big thing with that is, and that's okay.
It is okay. Yeah.
And we have to be careful letting that get in our head. I think as children's ministry leaders, and the enemy loves that. Oh my goodness, it is like a heyday for the enemy to come in like, yep, no, nobody will help you in your ministry is whack. It's like,
they don't even reply.
This is normal. This is not just you. This is normal for ministries across the country. Half of them are going to say no. That is not a reason to quit, to leave this strategy, to say this doesn't work. I love how you're talking about strategy. I feel like in your book, it is just filled with strategy. And sometimes, if we're honest, we can over spiritualize, something. Listen, hey, I'm all about praying for volunteers. I think you should pray for volunteers, but we serve a strategic God. He did not just spit and then everything just came in place. He had a strategy for everything. He put this in place so that this could support this. This has to be put in place first so that this could support this. And just to see how strategic our God is. And I just love all the strategies that you put in there and how it's work. It's gonna be work, but it is work.
And some of it is a numbers game. The way now again, there's lots of ways to recruit volunteers, but the primary way we teach it, and I teach it in the book, is through a 5-part framework. And the way the math works out is like if you reached out to 70 people, maybe 15 to 20 would reply, maybe only 10. I mean, at that point, that's why you need to reach out to so many, because so many of them just won't even reply. And then you'll lose a handful of them at each step of the process. But if you reach out to 70, there's a really good chance, it's not a guarantee by any means, but there's a good chance that you'll get to 10 to 15 that you're talking with and are interested and they're observing your ministry or whatever, and you can get 7 of them to say yes. And the further along you go in the framework, the more likely they are to say yes. But that first step, when you reach out, so many of those people just aren't going to respond. It's a way for them to say no without actually having to say no to you, so it doesn't make them feel awkward. They just archive that email or ignore that text or whatever that is.
What do you think? I'm gonna throw a curveball at you. What do you think when you say reach out to these people? Who are the people we should reach out to?
My answer to that is I think you should get specific, but to start with, it's anybody who could serve in your ministry. So, and to me, that's anybody who's not already serving somewhere else. So this is where, nobody would ever say this usually, but this is where your church database is your friend. Nobody else says it's your friend. Usually it's your nemesis, right? Like with the check-in system. And most churches, quite honestly, don't do a good job keeping it up. So that's hard. But if you can get your staff to do a good job of updating it and knowing who's serving and who's not, you can build your list of prospects right from there. I mean, you can just go do a search. Who's not serving? For most of us, you'll get way more people than you need. Like who's actively attending but not serving, and you'll get way more than you need. So I do like to narrow it down. Sometimes I pick like people who are in groups but aren't serving, parents, not parents, you know what I mean? Parents of this age group or not that age group. Sometimes I like to go with like people who've been here for a few months but not longer than a couple years, meaning they haven't really had a chance to get invited to serve yet, but they're a few months in. They're not really still deciding if this is their place. So I think you start big, like basically anybody who's not serving, and then you narrow it down and you make your list a little bit like who's going to be the most likely to say yes. And I'm a big fan of kind of asking anyone and kids. Like I'm not a huge fan of only ask parents, only ask young adults, only ask singles. I like a variety. And so for me, I just use that top umbrella. Who's not serving? Is that enough to make my VCR be 10? Great. There we go. Start reaching out to them and see how it goes.
And I love it. And I think as you dig deeper into your book, obviously and we're going to talk about that in a second. And I mean, let's just go there now when it comes to the onboarding process, because I mean, come on, we've all been there. The lion's den, you throw a volunteer. You're so happy you got the volunteer. We throw them into the lion's den and we say, hey, good luck. Hope they don't eat you and you're alive after this is over. at least you got a free t-shirt. Like,
Yeah, you're coming back, hopefully, if they didn't kill you.
like that is what we do. I think the onboarding, and obviously you go into this in the book, is so critical, and it's so important. And I think it's something that so many of us miss doing properly and effectively. When I think of onboarding, I think of Jesus. What was Jesus's onboarding process for the disciples? Did he just say, "Hey, come over here and now go do that"? But it was, I mean, he spent time with them and nurtured them and equipped them and then commissioned them. Tell us a little bit, and really from your book, I know you go into it. What's your advice for those who are watching today on what the proper onboarding process should be when you do get those volunteers to come in and serve?
Yeah, my biggest advice, and this is kind of like pre-onboarding, is, and in the book I talk about this, use orientations to recruit, and you can call it whatever you want. But do something. We call it orientations, which I know is confusing because most people, you think orientation, you think after you've already said yes, it's my new job orientation. In the book, I use it more like show it like a sneak peek, a preview, like a this is a terrible example, but like a timeshare sales thing. You know what I mean? Like it's where we're going to try to sell it to you. And so for me, an orientation is where you don't do policies, procedures, all the boring stuff that is really important. Orientation is vision. Like, why should you serve here? Why should you give your life to this? Why is this more important than 20 other things on your list every week? But then when you do get to onboarding, they say, yes, that is the time to hit those things that are really important, but not the most exciting. But then some of them are exciting because it's training, right? Like getting them used to it. My biggest advice is use apprenticeship. Find a way to apprentice. Like in our church, we do 4 weeks. We actually say 4 serves because there are some roles where you serve once a month. For example, like if you serve on stage hosting in our kids' elementary environment, you do that once a month, but for all the services. That way you're memorizing that script one time, you know. But for most of our roles, they're weekly. So 4 serves is 4 weeks. And all you do is you just take all the stuff you need to train them on to get them ready to start and just divide it up over the 4 weeks or however many weeks. Like don't do 16 weeks. I'd say do at least 2 weeks. Somewhere in there is a good number where you divide it up. And we've done that. We put some training content actually on video online. And then some training content is in like a handbook. And the idea is you watch that video online during the week. And then when we get together on Sunday and you're going to serve, you're paired up with another leader who's a veteran. Usually for us, it's coaches. Those are in our world, those are volunteers who lead volunteers. And they're walking through almost like a checklist. Hey, today we're talking about where to get the curriculum. And we're talking about the schedule and what the normal schedule looks like. And now we're talking about what to do if a kid, you know, is getting out of hand. I don't know, whatever. I'm making those up. But you'd essentially like you make the list of everything you want to train on, divide it into however many weeks, you know, 3-4 weeks, whatever it is, and then have other people training them. Because I think if you can apprentice, there's a few things that I love about it. You get other volunteers training new volunteers. That's huge, right? It like makes them embrace it more, know it more. And then they get a longer time to actually do it while they're learning it, you know, so they can kind of learn it better. And then I also love that it's whether it's 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks, they can look at it like, I don't have to be perfect here. I've got a runway where like, you're going to train me. I can ask questions and I don't have to get it right the first time. Cause there's such a fear. Like if I'm going to serve in kids ministry and I've never done it, like, do they expect me to know the whole Bible? What if they're bad? What if they don't like me? I mean, there's so many fears that prospective volunteers have that they don't ever usually say out loud. Will you make me serve here till I die? Like, you know, there's so many of these, you know what I mean? And so like a good yes is the answer to that question. But a good apprenticeship helps address some of those fears, you know, and I just find if you can do that well, which again, it's not easy. You got to build this. This is one of those things you got to spend time on. But once you build it and start running it and get other volunteers doing the apprenticing, you know, it's not nearly as hard. And I just find they stick long-term more. But the other advice I'd say is as you're onboarding them through like all the steps, you know, background check, interview, make that nice and strategic and systematic. Like it's quick, it's predictable. Like you track it, you remind people when they miss a step. Now you can always pause. Like if somebody's weird, I remember hearing Doug Fields talk about this just recently, actually at Orange Conference. He mentioned, I think somebody asked a question. I thought it was a great advice. He said, we can onboard a volunteer in about 2 weeks. That's normal. He said, but if I get weird vibes from you, like if you give me the heebie-jeebies, I'll make it last 6 months. I'll tell you got to go to that class, got to get in that group. Yeah. And I thought that's really smart. Like make it fast, but then be able to adjust it. I think a lot of times it's either not managed well or communicated well, and people fall off. Like I've not seen this up close, but I've heard church leaders say sometimes that, for every 10 people that raise their hand, say they want to serve, only about 4 or 5 actually end up serving. Yeah. And when I hear that, I think that's an onboarding problem. Yeah. Something's wrong. Once somebody says yes, you should get like 90% of them. Yeah. The only ones you shouldn't get is like, oh, this isn't actually a fit for me, or something is weird about you and we need
Nick, I think it's because a lot of us don't do the onboarding process. I mean, if we're honest, in our hearts, we're like, oh man, this sounds great. We want to do that, but we just end up not doing it. And I think that, to me, I think one of the suckiest things, yes, I say suckiest, but really it breaks my heart to see people whom God has called to be in the children's ministry walk away because we didn't do our parts as leaders to help them to feel equipped, to help them to feel prepared, and we get caught up in this warm body syndrome. And it's not that we just see them as a warm body, but because we get caught up in the emotions, we're just hoping that they can just do it on their own. And it's just not the way to do it. So I love that. I want to move on and ask you about this one, because I think that this is a frustrating element for some. No call, no shows, Nick.
Yep. Last minute cancellations.
Yes.
The 11, 12 p.m. Saturday night text.
No, they send you an email on Sunday. Wow, those are my favorites.
Like 8:30.
You're obviously checking your emails while you're in the trenches. Yep. Talk to us about that. I mean, for those who are watching, what are some advice that you have when it comes to deal, if you are dealing with that in ministry? What advice will you give to those where this is a strong issue for them?
It is. And you know what? I don't even talk about this in the book. So this is a great question. And I have thoughts, so they may not be as well organized, but here you go. Generally, the general rule is you get what you expect. So if you allow people to call out easily, they will continue to call out easily. And another general rule is this will always happen. There is no world where 100% of your people show up every week, all weeks of the year. That's impossible. So you have to allow for a certain percent of people that are always going to have to call out. That's normal. Now, to me, that percentage is somewhere around 5 to 10. Yeah. Like 10 would be high. 5 would be great. If you could have 5% only calling out every week, 5 people out of 100, that'd be great. But some people are listening thinking, I wish I had 5 or 10%. Like I feel like it's 30. I would say that is an issue. That's where we got to hit some of these other specifics. Because if it's 20% even, that's too many. Something's going on. So we go back to the other thing. You get what you expect. And so I think some of it is you have to raise the level of commitment. And man, we could spend a whole thing talking about that. But a couple practical examples would be, I hate, this is not going to be well received if I ever talk to somebody that owns one of these companies, but church management systems that I'm not going to call them out, even though they all do this now, church management systems that allow you to like schedule your volunteers, and the volunteer can like take their phone and be like, yes, I'm not coming, or yes, I'm coming. And then kids ministry leaders spend hours every week tracking down that yes. Yeah. Like, Esther, I haven't heard yet. Are you coming Sunday? No. Throw that junk out the window. Use the church management system. This is totally, you've got me fired off now. I'm on a soapbox. You could use it to schedule them, but the expectation should be you're coming. That's the expectation. I don't need you. I've never even used one of those, even though our church management system does that. Yes. Because in my mind, it's you're coming. Yep. If you're not, the way we communicate is you could email us anytime up till Thursday until 5. After that, it's a text or a phone call. You can't assume we're on email Saturday morning or Saturday night, 11 o'clock, waiting for that call. And of course, again, you get what you expect. So if somebody does do that, they email you Saturday at 10 a.m. It's a reply. Hey, sorry, you're going to miss out. Remember, I wouldn't even email till Monday. You know what I mean? Like on purpose, even if I saw it. Remember, we need a text or a phone call after 5 p.m. on Thursday. How's everything going? Are you okay? Like, you can be pastoral and also you hold that line a little bit. So that's one way to hold it. The other, the big thing is you have to follow up. You can't just let those call outs go kind of like unchecked. I even say this with volunteer trainings, or if you do like a huddle where your volunteers get together before the service, if somebody's not there, you have to acknowledge it. Now, not publicly. Hey, everybody, remember Esther missed last week's huddle? She's such a loser. Esther,
We
you
have
gotta
an
be better.
announcement. She's such a loser.
What were you doing, Esther? No, but I talked to you. Hey, Esther, we missed you at the huddle last week. Or, hey, I saw you called out late. I didn't see it though until after service. And don't lie about it, like whatever the truth is. Everything okay? You okay? Yeah. I mean, that's part of what it is. And even the people that it's okay, they have a very valid excuse. Like one of our volunteers called out this Sunday, his son has a fever. Yeah. And I think his wife is already serving somewhere else. It's like, okay, one of them had to stay home. Yeah. Like this is and so I'm probably quite honestly not checking in on Jeff because Jeff is super committed. Yeah. But if it was unsure or if it was a problem, I'd be checking. And then this is going to get me in trouble, Esther, but and we're not even going to have time to talk about it, but here it goes.
Yes, get in trouble, Nick.
a soapbox for me is and there are reasons for this. I don't want to pretend like it's one size fits all, but the less commitment you ask of your volunteers, the less commitment you get, not just in terms of this, but even in frequency. Mm-hmm. So if you only have them serve once a month, but they could serve every other week or weekly, you end up with people who are, again, it's not all one size fits all. Some of those once a month volunteers are amazing, but there is a correlation. I would take 20 volunteers who serve every week over 80 that serve once a month. Yeah. Every Sunday. Yeah. And that's weird, right? Because what I'm saying is I'll take 60 less volunteers. Who would say that? Yeah. I would say that. And this is why. Because those 20 that show up every week, if they're willing to do that, they're less willing to call out. They're going to take more ownership of it. You won't solve it completely, but the more you can raise the bar in expectation in terms of the role, is this weekly, is it bi-weekly, whatever, the more you can raise the expectation in terms of what happens when you can't show and you reinforce that, then you start to get the behaviors you want. And I think the tendency though is the opposite. We start to feel like, maybe I'm asking too much. Let's lessen the commitment. Yeah. And actually what happens is that makes it worse. You attract more people who are less committed and they, consequently don't show up. And it's funny because if you can build the culture of more committed people, they raise the waterline for everybody. All of a sudden the person's not as committed is a little more committed. Yeah. Because I realize what's expected here. You know what I mean? And so those are some tips I give to it. And I think most of it just comes down to, have you clearly articulated the expectation? Yeah. Have you held them accountable for it, over and over again? And
Nick, I think it's okay. I love how you were really challenging people to hold people accountable to that. Because I think that you're right. I think that some of us are like, well, I don't want them to not like me. And we think that we're helping by being timid and not approaching it and just but you really do. You end up creating this culture where what's not okay is now okay. And that's how people operate and function. Yeah.
And you don't want them to quit either. It's like, if I push in, they might quit. And the harsh truth is,
but I don't want you to quit.
And the harsh truth is, maybe they should.
Yeah.
And if you could get rid of that fear and actually recruit and get other people to be more committed, you wouldn't miss them. I mean, that sounds terrible, but you missed them personally. No, Nick, you would miss them personally, but not in as a whatever that role is they were serving.
Nick, let's go there because I think that's important too. I want to ask you about dealing with difficult, stubborn volunteers who do whatever they want to do. How do you? And I'll just tell you my experience. I remember the first church I worked for. This woman, she was amazing. I wouldn't have to be there at a certain time because I would know when I got there, all the lights were on, everything was set up, everything was out. But she was also a control freak. I was an outsider who came in. For her, she grew up in this environment, and it was for the curriculum. Nick, she never taught the curriculum. She would never teach a curriculum. She only taught three things. She taught Jesus, hell, and the Holy Spirit. That's what she taught.
I thought we were starting out good. Like when you said Jesus, I was thinking, well, maybe she teaches them three great things. Which those are all. Two of those are really great things. The other one is true, but I don't know if that's what you want. I don't know if you want that to be a
class. She taught the preschoolers.
And hell, that's great. That's 2/3 of your content right there. Something they don't understand. Something they're scared of. Great.
Something that will give you nightmares.
Someone, who will scare you, and something that.
How many of us have just these difficult volunteers, give us advice, Nick, for those who are watching. What do I do with these difficult people? Do I just let them continue to just be difficult? What's your advice about that, Nick?
Fire them. That's my advice. The kind of is my advice, but I would so a lot of times when you have that issue, there's there's a number of things that could happen because they could be unhealthy, in their own life, right? And so that's a conversation. They could be healthy, but just not aligned vision wise, and that's why they do that and they don't listen. They also could be, and this is a common one, actually, probably the most common, they could just be unclear on what's expected, what should be. And so then, the lack of clarity, people just make up whatever they want. So, everyone does what is right in their own eyes thing. Again, that church that I'm working with, all those people have good hearts. They're doing good things. I mean, it's not like they're in there teaching hell every week to preschoolers. They're doing, they're playing YouTube videos on an iPad, which is kind of illegal. So there's but again, I'm bringing some of this to their attention because they don't know. And I understand that because a lot of people don't know that. But it's all good hearted. So that's an example of a volunteer where it's like they're hard, but not because they want to be hard. They're just trying to do what they think is best. So it really comes down to hard conversations. One of our staff, my pastor is great at this. He's great at unity. He's great at hard conversations. Wow. And in fact, in the book, I even talk about one of his quotes where he says, serving is a privilege, which is absolutely true. And so if you go into one of those conversations thinking serving is a privilege, like you get to do this. You don't just do this to help me or to help this church. It's an honor and a privilege to serve as part of the church. And therefore you don't just get to do whatever you want. We are a team. There is leadership here. And so I think you got to have that conversation, but you enter it like with a pastoral heart of, let me just listen and see where they are. Cause you don't know. They might've been, maybe they're just unclear. Oh, I had no idea you didn't want me to teach hell and the Holy Spirit. Now a lot of times they do know. And so the way I would approach it is you have a conversation, you listen, and in that conversation, be ready to clearly articulate what you expect. Ideally, have the support of your leadership before you get in there. So especially if you feel like this could go bad, we have this right now. We've got a guy, this is a private Facebook group kind of, right? So I can say it here. It has nothing to do with kids ministry, actually.
Nobody, okay, y'all.
I'm gonna tag him in the comments. This isn't even in kids ministry. It's in a different ministry, but we don't know if this is true, but there is a pattern that he has always had a hard time taking leadership from the women on our staff.
Well,
and consequently, women have been the leaders of his ministry 90% of the time. So, and then another issue has come up now with our current leader of that ministry. Now, what's always kind of made it not much of an issue is the coach, the volunteer who leads the volunteers, has happened to always be a guy that on the teams he's been on. And so that's come up again. And anyway, he did something recently where it was he was mad. It was a silly thing about it. He was mad that some volunteers were doing other volunteers' roles and they didn't just do their own thing and whatever. Silly thing, right? And he made some kind of a fuss about it. And in some ways, I felt like didn't show respect to our staff person who's a female, and then talked about it with the coach who's a guy. And of course, our coach who's a guy, he's a good leader. He comes right back to staff and makes sure we're all on the same page. And there was a conversation with this guy. And the reality is it's not over though, because he's kind of dismissive. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm such a problem. Well, he's just trying to, word it. And a lot of us would just let that go. We don't want to deal with it. We already talked, right? They already talked. But the problem is we're not letting it go because it's not okay if you just get off acting like that, being disrespectful like this. And part of me is we don't even necessarily need to solve if the issue is female leadership. Maybe you just, I don't know, maybe it's a theological thing. Maybe it's not. It's more just no, that is not going to be okay here. That you just do whatever you want or say whatever you want or be divisive or whatever. And so it's not fun, but that's where that hard conversation, another conversation has to be had there. So it's not even just one, she's got to go back, talk to him again. And really it's mostly for his benefit, quite honestly. The ministry is going to be fine. If he ended up not serving, they'll be fine. So I think you got to have the hard conversation. Yes, be willing to fire them. I joked about that, but that's absolutely true. Again,
it's okay. It's
that bar of
commitment goes on. It's okay to let people go.
Well, and usually it gets better. I mean, there is an addition by subtraction idea. If the bar is here and you raise it here, you do lose some of these people. But you know who else you attract? these people.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and some of these people, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And so I remember Patrick Lencioni talking about that one time on a podcast years ago, you know, about in the business world. But he was asked, because it was a church leader podcast, how does this relate to volunteers? And he's like, it's exactly the same. Like, if you raise the bar, you know, with volunteers,
Yeah.
you'll just attract better, more committed volunteers. And even the ones you have that stick around will grow in their commitment and responsibility.
Wow. Yeah.
And you'll lose some, you know, who
Mhm.
aren't ready to, you know, commit and serve and raise to that level. But that's okay, you know, because maybe they'll come back, maybe they'll figure it out. But the whole ministry, you know, will be better for it.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. Nick, oh my goodness. I feel like it's so many like layers. It's like an onion with so many layers.
Well, it's volunteers. Volunteers, man. There's like 100 subtopics of volunteers.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I know. I'm like,
we do this forever.
Me and Nick could literally talk to you guys about this like all night. But listen, I want to ask you this as we're preparing to kind of wrap this up, because I think that this is just super important. Because I know sometimes we have people who are watching and they're like, look, you know, me and Nick, we're both at Orange and spoke at Orange. And I remember one woman came up to me and I'm like, man, I know you represent so many children's ministry leaders out there. She's like, Esther, I have a group of women. We're in a smaller context and they are serving and they are all burnt out. Like they are all tired and I don't know what to do. I have no one to replace them. If they all walk away and leave, I mean, it's just crazy. And the funny thing she shared, she was like, they didn't even want to tell me about it. They told somebody else about it, and then that person came to me, and I'm devastated and I'm horrified, and I don't know what to do. Nick, what is your advice on preventing this volunteer fatigue and burnout with your faithful volunteers? Because I mean, I think this was something. I think in children's ministry, we can really get to a place where we are over leaning on them, because they are our tried and true, ride or die people you know you can trust and you know you can count on. And sometimes I feel like we can give them maybe too much without realizing it might be a little too much. What's your advice on how to try to prevent that?
Yeah, it's hard because it takes time. I think it's conversations one-on-one. I mean, you could do some group things, like if you got together all of your small group leaders or all your teachers or whatever, and did, 6 to 8 to 10, 12 people at a time, that could work too. Actually, there's part of that that's fun because they connect to each other. They can, I mean, if you could share a meal together, or even if you couldn't, but you get to just have some fun and talk. I think they just need a chance to give feedback, to vent, and do all those things. It's kind of like, I mean, I just had a conversation with my son tonight that was a hard conversation, and we were kind of we was sort of yelling at each other. We were kind of yelling at each other, trying to get the sports, and afterwards there's this debrief where like I'm do what I have to do often, which is apologizing as a dad, like, hey, I'm sorry. And it was interesting because like it happens like it always does. He was frustrated about some things. I'm frustrated because of how he was handling it and what he was doing. But then once we both can vent about that, we can kind of get that off, let that steam off, and then we can talk for real about it. And, and the conversation we had home was a lot different than the conversation we had going to lacrosse where he didn't want to go. And I think volunteers, if they don't have an outlet for that, and it could be anything, because honestly, it could be about the ministry, but it could be about their own personal life. Like who knows what's going on. And if there's no place to talk about that and vent that, then they end up, it just implodes and they quit. And then especially if it's about the ministry. So I think some environment where they can be heard. And then after that, like step 2 is inspire them. You come back to that vision thing. Like, hey, this is hard. I mean, I think about the church I'm working with. It's like they have been holding it together as volunteers without leadership for a long time. They mentioned lack of training, lack of encouragement as one of their things. And I thought, man, they definitely need somebody to come in here and just hear from them, listen to them. They're probably doing things I would not want them to be doing if it was me. But I wouldn't tell them that right away, because that's not what they need to hear right now. They're doing their best. And so you listen, let them vent, and then remind them of how important this is. Like you may not be able to see this, but here's what you're doing. Here's why this matters. Tell stories as much as you can. Get in the habit of making volunteers tell stories about what happened each week. That's a win.
I love it.
They don't do that naturally. So you got to kind of you got to ask for it every week, even when it's awkward and nobody talks, and then keep asking. And then you keep track of it yourself, and you tell every story you possibly can because even if it's like 5 people removed or whatever, like it's a totally different job than theirs. That's fine. Tell that story, celebrate. We're recording this at a time when a lot of churches are doing senior graduations or whatever. Tell the preschool ministry the influence they've had in kids' lives. Maybe it's not those exact kids that are graduating and getting celebrated in service, but it's going to be. It's going to be one day. And the faith journey they have is because of the work you did. So don't forget it. Like it's that kind of thing. Like don't ever let them forget it. I think that, and then because it's hard, because I know one of the things people are thinking when they're listening to this is, man, recruiting, we got to do these things, onboarding, we got to do this, commitment, we got to encouraging these volunteers, that's tough. And the reality is you really can't do all those things at once, all the time, equally well. And so if you feel like the need right now is that, like that's where people are, do that, focus on that first. Listen, do that first. Then you can make your way to some of these other, and just tackle one thing at a time. Like I'm going to work on recruiting. I'm going to work on vision or encouragement or whatever it is. But I would say if you feel like that's the culture of your ministry or the temperature, start there. Listen to people, because you don't want to, you don't want to lose them when they're giving their all, and they're just tired and need inspired.
Nick, leave us with some last words of encouragement for the person who's on here or who's going to watch later, who they're like, man, I got to be at this conversation. I have to watch this about volunteers because I am done. I'm at my wit's end. I want to be a good leader. I feel like I'm a failure when it comes to getting these volunteers. Leave us with some last words of encouragement for those who are watching this evening.
You bet. I would say all of us are more alike than we realize, which is a good thing, because sometimes you feel like this is only me. I can't recruit. Why do I have this problem? I'm having this leadership issue or issue with these people that is tough. The good news is you're not alone. You're a better leader than you think. Way better leader than you think. Because if you're like most children's ministry leaders, you didn't even get trained well in this. You know what I mean? Nobody told you, here's how you recruit. Here's how you lead. Here's how you deal with conflict. Here's how, you know what I mean? Here's how you build a healthy culture. Most of us didn't get that, whether we went through some formal training or did not. And most of us did not. And so you're actually a better leader than you think, because you figured out what you figured out now by doing it, by learning from other people. And so you absolutely have what it takes to do this, to build the volunteer culture you desire. It doesn't happen quickly. It doesn't happen overnight. It is hard work, but it's okay to let some things go and pause them or stop them or just neglect them for a few months or 6 months or whatever that is, and spend time on this, whether it's recruiting or encouraging volunteers or building a structure that, is going to be healthy. Any one of those things, pick one and go to work at it. And just do that week after week. It's always small bites in ministry. That's one of the things that's hard, is like, most of our time is spent preparing for that week and serving these people and pastoring that week. So there's only a little time every week that we can give to like working on it. So make sure you don't feel like you can microwave it. You can't. It's going to take some time. That's okay. Do what you can now, just a little bit, focus on that one thing. And eventually, within a few years, you actually can build this volunteer culture you envision where it is healthy. Yeah, people call out, but we have volunteers and we have enough, and we've got volunteers who lead volunteers, and man, they're passionate about it just like I am. And I mean, we didn't talk about some of the exceptions. I mean, there are realities where a church is too unhealthy or too toxic or too whatever that might be. But within what you control, have this mindset that you can do it. You're the right leader. God's called you. He's equipped you. Pray to the Lord of the harvest, do the work, and be okay with saying no to some other things so you can do what matters most. Can't do everything. I
love it, Nick. I love it. I mean, you guys have heard it here this evening. You are not alone. You are not by yourself. Nick, tell us how we can. Oh, look, I'm trying to get the focus. And you could get multiple colors, guys. We just found this out.
Yeah, not on purpose, by the way. Just because Nick doesn't know how to design a book cover. So see how these two are different colors? This is literally the same batch from Amazon. I'm not a professional publisher.
Nick, how can we get this book, Nick? Where do we go? What is the preferred place?
I would say go to volunteerplaybook.com, because you can link to Amazon there, which is where most people are going to get it. The one thing I will say though, is if you like the audio version, it is on Audible. That was one of the hardest things in the world, by the way, Esther. We could talk about that some other time.
Yeah, I know.
That was crazy. But if you like the audio version, if you buy the print version, again, I don't know if my camera will focus on that, probably not, or the Kindle version, you can get the audio version free. So it's kind of like a 2-for-1. Nice. It comes in the form of like a private podcast. I mean, so you can't listen to it.
That? Look.
There you go. So if you're like, do you listen to books? I listen to most of my books.
I'm a bum. I love listening to books.
Yeah, I do that. That's most of my books now. Now some I still read, so like I definitely have books. Look at that that I have the print copy for. But I listen to a lot of books, and so like if you do but you want both, you can kind of get a 2-for-1. The other thing is every chapter has resources that we put in, kind of like it's like a course, but it's a product thing on Ministry Boost, and you can get all that at volunteerplaybook.com. You can actually get it without buying the book, because I have no way. Like I didn't want to deal with that whole like send me your receipt and like I don't have time for that. So if you just want those things for free, even without buying the book, you can go get that stuff there. So that's the best place.
I love it. You guys make sure that you get your copy. We're going to make sure that that link is in here so that you can go there. Nick, thank you so much for pouring so much wisdom on us tonight when it comes to recruiting, retaining, empowering, all this work we have to do when it comes to volunteers. As Nick has said it so eloquently tonight, know that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. I'm going to make myself be back in focus. There she is. And that the world needs what God has put in you to offer it. And I just want to encourage you this evening. We know that I think this is a hot topic, Nick, in children's ministry, because this is one of our main jobs, is to get volunteers, to keep them happy, to make sure that we're doing what we can, to make sure that they love us and stay and love Jesus. And yes, we realize that's why y'all got to get this book, okay? So that you have all the layers right in front of you. No way we could have covered all of that in one conversation, but make sure you get your copy. You guys know that we are here every third Tuesday of the month so that we can get better together and grow as one body in Christ. Thank you so much for spending your time with us this evening, and we will see you guys next month.